Purify my heart, let me be as gold and precious silver. Purify my heart, let me be as gold.
Today is Good Shepherd Sunday. So reflect on Jesus, our Good Shepherd, one who guides us, one who feeds us, one who leads us. Today, Good Shepherd Sunday, we also reflect on vocation. And today we are going to reflect on vocations in the church. Because we have all been called. God, when God created us, He created us with a purpose, with a reason. I was created with a purpose. God created me for a reason. God created you for a reason. And that's why today we celebrate our own vocation. Whatever life that we have been called to. Maybe it's the priesthood, maybe it's the religious life, maybe it's the married life, maybe it's the single life. But today we want to reflect on the life that God has called us to. And particularly we want to look at this morning, we want to look at how we are to live out our vocation in the year 2014 and beyond. So how am I as a priest, I'm called to live out my priesthood in 2014 and beyond. We have to understand that the way someone was called to the priesthood to live out his priesthood 10 years ago is not the same way one is called to live out his priesthood today. Pope Francis has been challenging us priests to live out our priesthood in 2014 and beyond so that it can bring life. And let us look at some of the things that Pope Francis has been asking us priests to do. The first thing it says is that it says, stop committing spiritual prostitution. Stop committing spiritual prostitution. Because there have been a lot of spiritual prostitution taking place. And what does Pope Francis mean by spiritual prostitution? Priests who are called to be shepherd must live among his people. He must be with them. In life, you find that we are all tempted, and priests as well are tempted. We are all tempted to look for greener pastures. We are all tempted to look for a parish that has a bigger collection. We may tend to look for a parish where people may give us more money to spend on the side as pocket change. And so many as priests, so many of us are caught up in this spiritual prostitution. So many people are called to the priesthood prefer not to work in Grenada, but they prefer to go elsewhere, where it is said, there is greener pasture. If we give in to spiritual prostitution, what will be the end result? The end result will be you will suffer. You will suffer. You may ask a young man who is ordained to the priesthood, where would you like to serve? Would you like to serve in Grandance or Victoria? Of course you're tempted to go to Grandance. Who wants to come to Victoria? Who wants to go to the countryside? And so Pope Francis is saying there is a lot of spiritual prostitution taking place, and he's asking his priests to not take part in this, and to live out your priesthood in this year 2014 and beyond. Live out your priesthood as a good shepherd, as one who is willing to serve wherever he's sent, and one who is willing to give his all, to love the people, no matter how difficult it may be, no matter how challenging parish life may be. We are called to stay where we are and to love our people. And that's why he says to us priests that we must keep the freshness and joy in our lives. We must keep the freshness and joy in our lives. There is no holiness in sadness. That's why as priests in today's ministry, as we live out our ministry in 2014 and beyond, we can't afford to lose our joy. We can't afford situations that may happen in the parish to allow us to steal our joy. And therefore this morning, despite the challenges of life, Pope Francis asks me as a priest and all priests to be filled with joy this morning. Let nothing disturb you, he says. Let nothing disturb you. Let no one steal your joy from you. And he says to us priests, he said, do not take yourself too seriously. Do not take yourself too seriously. You will make mistakes as a priest, but don't bother. Just pick up yourself and move on. Don't let your parishioners make you sad. No. But be always filled with joy. And then Pope Francis also says, as we celebrate Vocation Sunday, he says to us priests to avoid trappings like the latest smartphones and expensive cars. To avoid trappings like the latest smartphones and expensive cars, so that, he says, we can devote more resources to help the poor. And so priests today are called to live simple lives, so that people can live. the simpler our life will be, the more there will be for others who do not have. And also, he also addressed religious sisters. Recently, he had a meeting with religious sisters, and he told them, be a mother, not an old maid. Be a mother and not an old maid. He says to religious sisters, he says, not because you're called to live a life of chastity, not because you did not bear a child in your womb, that you will be lifeless and sterile and sad and cold. No, as a religious sister, you must give life. You must be fruitful. You must be fertile. And so he was challenging religious sisters that in the ministry, when people encounter them, they must encounter life through them. And so too, we can say something to mothers today as we celebrate Mother's Day. That as a mother, you are a mother because you are called to give life. And motherhood is not only about giving birth to a child, but you must give life. And you give life through the gifts that God has given to you. Because mothers are affectionate, they are filled with tenderness, and they have a mother's intuition. They can know when the children are sad. They can know when something is wrong with the child. That is a special gift of mothers. And therefore, there are so many mothers in the church. And today, Vocation Sunday, the church is asking you as mothers to be fruitful. Let the people in the church, let the children around, let people experience your affection. Let people experience your tenderness. Let people experience a mother's intuition. And that's how we will be fruitful. And that's how we are called to live out our vocation today. And also, there is something that I would like to just say to you this morning. It also deals with how we are called to live out our vocation. And I would like to go back to Habakkuk the prophet, Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1. And Habakkuk was writing at a time when all seems lost in his generation. He complains to God because there is violence and corruption throughout his country, Judah. He is disillusioned as the good and righteous people have no power and authority, while he experienced the evil rule over them and seemed to triumph. And faith and faithfulness grow dim in the land. But instead of disillusionment or despair, the prophet Habakkuk turns to God instead and says, and listen what he says. He says, I will stand at my guard post and station myself upon the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what answer he will give to my complaint. one of the things we have to do as we live out our vocation, my dear brothers and sisters, we have to position ourselves to see what God is going to do. And position ourselves to be part of it. That is what prophets and saints and heroes of the faith always do. They position themselves to be part of what God is going to do, with them or without them, so that they get to be part of it. If we go back to the story of where Jesus multiplied the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, we find in that story a little boy with a basket with 5 loaves and 2 fish. He positioned himself. God was about to do something. God was about to bless, and he was right there. He was there at the right time, at the right place. And he was able to live out his vocation right there and then. Because that's one of the reasons God created him. God created him so that there will come a time when God will use him, and through him, God will perform a miracle. Are we positioning ourselves to be part of what God is doing? And as I reflected on the prophet Habakkuk, who came to mind, is a cousin of mine called, she is in it, and she does a lot of farming. And it always seems that God is always blessing her. And why? Why it seems that God is always blessing her? Because even before the rain begins to fall, she's busy weeks in advance. She's busy preparing the land. And she's busy getting her seeds and everything and the tools ready. So when the first rain falls, she immediately goes and begins her farming. And she's always the first to be reaping her crops. And people are always saying, why is God always blessing her? Her hands are very good when it comes to farming. No, it's not because her hands are very good. It's because she positions herself so that when God releases his blessing, she's there ready to receive it. How many of us this morning are in a position to receive God's blessing this morning? Are we ready? Are we willing? And that's why the same prophet Habakkuk in chapter 2 verse 3 says, the vision has an appointed time. It will not disappoint. God's purpose for you will be fulfilled. It will be fulfilled. There is no doubt about it. It will absolutely happen. God's vision is coming. God's purpose for you is coming. But are you positioning yourself to receive God's blessing when it comes? And so many times, people who are prepared are people who seems to be blessed. You may think of students or young people who may be in search of a scholarship. And suddenly there is an advertisement on the newspaper that a scholarship is available. And you find some students are prepared. They are positioned. They have positioned themselves. So they have their resumes all written up. They have all the documents there ready. And as soon as they see this advertisement, right away they go and they apply. And then the response is, these people are ready. They are ready. But you find in other cases, you find as we see the advertisement, and then and there is when we begin to write our resumes or gather our resources. And then when we get there, it's already late. There is one thing about God that we have to be sure of, that we have to believe that God is achieving great things in and through this generation. God is doing and achieving great things in and through this generation. But we can experience this greatness of God if we position ourselves. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, on this Vocation Sunday, the question that we all have to ask ourselves is, am I positioning myself to receive the blessings of God? Am I ready? Am I open? Am I willing? And so, my dear brothers and sisters, my prayer this morning is that we as a church on this Vocation Sunday will be fruitful. Will be fruitful. And you mothers, you are part of the church. And your motherhood involves being fruitful, being life-givers. You are not only called to be a life giver in only giving birth to a child, but you are life givers by allowing people to experience in you tenderness, affection. Your call as mothers, you have a special gift of intuition. You are able to pick up things quite easily. You are able to look at someone's face and know that something is wrong and they are not well. And God is asking you to use that gift He has given to you so that He can bring blessing and healing to His sons and daughters. So today we thank God for all our mothers in our midst. We want to thank God for the gift of motherhood. as Pope Francis says, can you imagine a church without nuns? Can you ever imagine a church without nuns? What church will it be? What church will it be like? And therefore, can you imagine a church or a world and a society without mothers? Mothers are a gift to us. They are gifts. And today we are called to celebrate them. Celebrate the gift of motherhood. Celebrate our mothers. Because they are God's gifts to us. And we must love them and cherish them. Amen.